Link, a little bit of Dan, and then... All right, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Cathode Ray Podcast. I'm here with my friend Steve Nutter. How are you this week, Steve?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, Lewis. It's later here. We've managed to connect on our amazing time-traveling trip here today, but I'm glad, the sun's... It's early morning for me, and it's actually evening for me tonight, so I'm glad to connect with you. It's been a while. We haven't had anything... it's been harder for us to talk, so it's really good to see your face again.
It's nice to talk to you as well. So to fill everybody in, why am I in this different circumstance here? So I'm in Australia right now. My girlfriend and I have come back for a few weeks to get a bit of sun and see my parents. We're in my parents' house, literally in my parents' house right now. I wanted to do it in the garage where it's a bit more interesting, but the rain is coming down really heavily. Maybe you've seen some news and quite possibly... If you're following our good friend Dan Mons up there in Brisbane, he has been rained out completely. I heard on the news this morning, once in a 500 years or whatever, something like this storm that Dan's had up there in Brisbane, and he's done an amazing job. He literally was like pumping nonstop. Did you see those videos from Dan? Just pumping nonstop.
Yeah, I did. That's terrible to have to deal with. And it's like, I feel bad for him, especially because... We just talked to him, of course, and then, I know that he's still getting a lot of stuff, like the retro NAS is still like growing, and there's all this stuff being developed on it, and at the same time, he's like, oh, by the way, look at my freaking mess that's coming in my basement, and then at the same time, I have a basement here, and that's like the worst thing for me is when it starts raining for like 2 or 3 days, and I'll see one spot over here where water will come under the floor. So I'm just seeing, I'm like, oh my gosh, poor Dan, like, yeah, that's one of the reasons that when you live and you have basements, you like try to keep everything like 6 inches off the ground or 5 inches because it's like bound to happen. But I think that I know he had to rip his carpet out, and like, if he
seems like he got everything up. He said maybe a foot or something.
Yeah,
eventually got to, and he managed to raise everything. But
it's crazy.
If I wasn't mistaken, I think maybe like I saw a couple of Astro City cabs there, and maybe they got the bottom, but there's no electronics in the bottom, so
and
like, okay,
thankfully they aren't like wooden, like the all the other kind of
like your Neo Geo is wooden.
Yeah, like that's wood. That would get. I mean, it would just waterlog wood at the bottom, and the power supplies down there actually, so that would be underwater. But it's not turned on or plugged in, so it would. But yeah, that's rough for him. I also saw where he actually put that it was his, like, I think it's him and his, today while we're filming, it's him and his wife's like 14th anniversary, and they're sitting there spending the whole week ripping out carpet and dealing with this stuff. So yeah, it's the first thing obviously is to be concerned that everybody's okay and nothing happens, because floods can be disastrous and like really quickly happen, and that's what they turn into something worse. People aren't really expecting it to happen so badly, and water just comes up super quick. And so
it's come very quick up there. I mean,
watching
it's all over the news here in Australia, obviously. So and they're just showing, like, in the time they're talking, you can see the water rise. It was here an hour ago, and now it's up there. It's truly amazing, and there's still no-go zones. The emergency service is still out. A lot of people they're just like, look, if it's safe, stay in your home. Don't come out. Don't go anywhere. Because so many Australians would be like, yeah, mate, I'll just drive through that water. Don't worry about a bit of water. And then the next thing they know, they're on the news because the four-wheel drive's floating down the river. So
the one of the things that turns this into an even scarier situation. And this is all because it's in Australia. And that's because when Dan was showing the flooded pictures, he started saying all his friends were dying and like coming out on the floor, and it was all these freaking spiders that are like the size of my fist. He's like, I got like 20 of these dead spiders now floating around here. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's what did I see? I saw some pictures of a flood happening in an area of Australia, and then it was like 1 million spiders running from, one section to higher water, and it was the creepiest thing. I mean, it's not even tiny spiders, it's like a migration of mass spiders, and just this, so Yeah, you guys have definitely got a bunch worse creepy crawlies down there, and
We got
yeah,
So
it's
anyway,
not.
shout
But
outs
flood
to
is
Dan.
flood's not fun. And Dan, yeah, hang in there, man. It's hopefully you guys will dry out and stop getting so much monsoon. Is this a normal thing for Australia to encounter like that much water? I mean, I know you said it was 500 years, but is this normally a wet time of year down there? Or?
This is about the end of summer around here. Usually a bit of rain. We're used to extreme weathers. So I mean, on the other side of the country in Perth, true, it is 3,000 kilometers away, but they've got heat waves over there and drought and 40 degrees and that sort of stuff. So it's always a country of extremes. We're used to things kind of going wrong, but I mean that's a pretty extreme.
That's pretty extreme. Do you guys get tornadoes?
Not so much. Maybe in the north, right up in the north in Darwin. That's a bit more tropical up there. You're gonna. Also, they're used to that level of rain. Also in a huge country, 3,000 kilometers either way, like America.
Sure.
But up in the north, it's more tropical. They have something called the wet season, and that whole outback just floods. And you've got to plan your whole thing. You can't make it through. So that is part of life in the very north. But Dan is about halfway up Australia, if you sort of look at end to end. And those huge storms have now come south. And as I said, like we're about 8 hours south of him, and we're getting the tail end. I think I read on the news, sort of that weather pattern is moving around where I am, thankfully. But it means no beach for us.
I didn't think about that. That stinks. Yeah,
I'm still getting a bit. I still get a bit of red.
Yeah, you're getting some sand, right? Yeah,
like the beach yesterday.
Oh, that's fun. At least you get
even if it's an overcast day, you still get some red. So
yeah, so you get some used to that some of the sunshine before you have to go back to the last bit of cold there in Europe. I'm really ready for the cold season. I was laughing. It's almost done now here, pretty much.
Do you still have snow outside?
No, it's been gone for a while and hasn't come back, thankfully. But,
good.
But yeah, I mean, it's there's been a lot of stuff going on. You got Dan over there, and like I said, hopefully he's doing better. I'm sure eventually he'll dry out. Yeah, hopefully, and take care of it. But yeah, it's good. It's good that he has some help there. I'm sure his wife would have preferred a much better anniversary, but at least they have each other.
That's the way.
And that's good. So, but yeah, what else is on your ticket here today?
Well, I just I felt, even though we're talking about retro games and monitors here, I just wanted to make a quick reference to what's happening in the Ukraine. Maybe, I don't know, if someone knows me, it might be a little bit tone deaf. I didn't say anything because where I live in Estonia in the north of Europe, we're only 1,000 kilometers away or so from the Ukraine. And look, there's been plenty of social media coverage about how good the Ukrainian brothers and sisters are doing, holding up against the onslaught. But just to sort of to bring it back to a technology connection, just 2 hours ago, I was looking at some tweets. So Elon Musk has said that he's going to put the Starlink satellites in. And at first I was like, oh, okay, Elon, you're just doing your talk, the blah, blah, blah. But two things came through. The first one was from the vice prime minister of the Ukraine, showed a picture of a truck full of Starlink receivers, full of dishes. So look, they don't say where that is. That's tactically not very sound to say where pictures are taken. And they say, don't put that in, like strip the EXIF information from your pictures and things like that. So it looks, first of all, like, well, some hardware actually hit the ground, which is good for them there. But I was also following just a regular Ukrainian IT guy, just a nerd, just like you or me. And like us, we want to get gear. We want to get the latest technology. And he'd already pre-ordered the Starlink receivers, the dish on the ground, because he's a nerd. And he was just waiting for them to
turn it on.
Turn it on.
Yeah,
So when Elon did that a couple of days ago, the first thing they could very immediately do was turn on access for the Ukraine, even though, but he happened to have one of those. So now, I don't know if you know, but to set up a satellite receiver, you usually require some instruments, some device to help you aim it at the satellite. But using what he had around, he was able to get it going from his apartment in Kiev, and he posted a screenshot with the speed test, and he was getting 130 megabytes down from his Starlink satellite in the middle of Kiev. And I just think that was amazing. It's just a really nice kind of technology story.
That is cool. It's better. still better than the cable company around here, so that's good. So, no,
That's
I mean,
true.
I thought this was really cool because actually, I did see. We were talking about this before we came on. I haven't seen as many posts about the stuff, so we were talking about catching up on some things. But I did actually catch the Starlink stuff just because, like you said, the first thing I thought was, oh, here comes Elon just trying to get his stock price up or something. And just talking trash, because all I've heard about Starlink up to this point is how like everybody was this early adopter, kind of like the guy in Ukraine, and they had all gotten this equipment and they were just waiting for this service to kind of be turned on in the last few months. And some of these people had bought this stuff like a year or two ago. But before we talked about this, I watched another guy who got his kit in, and this was the second video I've watched on it, and it was actually quite surprising how much easier it looked to like go out and get a signal. So like his package was in a box, like the boxes that you saw on the back of the offloading truck, and he had a rectangular dish, came on like a 4-way pad thing, and he said that he would go out, and then it came with like 100 feet of cable, right? Okay. So 30 meters of cable, 40 meters of cable or something. So you go out and you just stick this thing in your yard and you plug it into this wireless router, and it's even capable of like being outdoors. It's like heavy duty plugs for power, and it was literally something. Yeah, you go set it somewhere, and then the thing does a self-adjusting pattern to get the best. Yeah. To get the best, like you press a sequence and it'll just start like shifting around like this.
If you generally point it in the direction of the satellite, it fine-tunes itself.
It finds the satellite direction. Like this guy showed it, and it pointed north from his house, and it got linked up that way. And then, so that was kind of just interesting timing that I saw how it actually worked. So it made more sense that you could. This seems like a field thing where you really could go, is if long as you had the power, like the electricity source, you could go out and set one of these up. And that's funny that I start to keep rambling here, but the second video was kind of like that too. So I don't know if you want to interject before I get into that one.
Oh, just I think that I mean, why are we talking about? Maybe it seems insignificant. I don't know, to talk about Starlink or something. I think for me, it's I've been following a lot of Ukrainian accounts. I mean, the president is doing a masterful job as a leader, and you can follow different accounts and get like hour by hour updates about what's happening on the ground. And I would say that I'm probably following a bunch of Ukraine accounts to hear that good news. Like I like, why am I talking about Starlink when it's a war and so forth? Well, because it's some positivity in the middle of it. It's something to focus on, to think like that they're doing it. But also, from what I've seen, the Ukrainian people are doing a pretty good job of keeping the power on and keeping the internet connected. They seem to understand the information war, how it can be fought from a positive angle. And certainly we know how fake news and hackers and all that have interrupted things in a bad way, interfered with different things. So the Ukrainians doing a pretty good job of keeping the power on, keeping the internet connected. But it's, I guess, nice to know that there's this other backup, that as long as there's a bit of power, they can still get a signal out to the world. So good on those guys.
Yeah, and it's the human resolve it's great to see. I mean, it's really tragic and a struggling situation, obviously, and terrible. It's easy for me to say something thousands of miles away. But yeah, I mean, we're very, sympathetic for any of this. This is insane. And, just seeing, like you said, the human resolve where people, normal people are coming together, helping each other, doing whatever they can, to kind of continue on, in their lifestyle and believing, what drives them. It's a good thing to see. And even if it is something as silly as talking about getting the internet going, you can tell that it kind of thwarts some of those tactics we had talked about too, just off air a little bit, like the old tactic of sieging your opponent, your smaller opponent, trying to surround them and cut them off from the outside world. And thankfully, there are solutions that can go in and like help out. Something like that can be so helpful. and be used so quickly. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because it ties into this Starlink deal. The other video I watched was a guy took the Starlink setup out to a rural farm, and he set up a whole network out there using Raspberry Pis and solar panels.
Tremendous.
And he built a network using solar and that's all he needed to power it and get internet going. So
completely off grid.
Was like a server computer. Yeah, just off the grid. And he was like, "This is." So it was a pretty interesting thing because he's like, "What do I?" He's like a Raspberry Pi expert. So he went and did this with the Starlink thing.
That's
so
great.
It was
information.
Cool.
You know, no doubt there's probably some Ukrainian nerds there. All of a sudden they're experts on solar power, and they're like, right, we've got the Starlink. Well, we need power. Okay, they're filling around. They've probably maybe ripped off some solar panel for some roof, and some Ukrainian nerds already worked out how to fire up a small, at least run a Pi and then run that, and because it seems like with these guys they'll go to the end. So small bits of hope can be, and they're very good at. I don't know, taking whatever they've got and making something from it. So,
right. Yeah.
It's cool to hear that sort of stuff.
Well, let's just hope, we got each of us is, even if it's the only connection that, personally my closest connection would be, since you're living there, would be to you, but also people in the retro gaming community that are still, stuck in this stuff. Please just consider, having thoughtful reflection for them. People like I know for sure Crix is over there, and then Sorg, is that right? He's the they're the FPG.
I always get him confused. Sorg is the main guy, the instigator of the original.
Somebody did one of the Nintendo. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly. I'm not the. Somebody works on Mr. Expert, developer.
I was a bit confused as well. I have to admit, maybe someone in the comments can help us. It was Sorg I thought was the main who really instigated the project, the main driver.
Somebody
but
else,
I was,
so that's what I was
corrected
thinking.
later that the dude who was coding the Saturn core and who's done other previous cores, I believe he is also. I got confused. That's not Sorg, and he's also Ukrainian as well. So anyway,
okay. Well, there's definitely people over there, and so they're going through some heavy shit right now, I'm sure. So it's not. We gotta.
It's all good. We're thinking of them. We're thinking of them.
Yeah, definitely. So constantly. So.
But let's talk a bit. Let's go back home. Let's go positive stuff. I've been traveling. So I haven't been looking. I haven't seen a CRT in maybe one in the store or something. I saw.
You haven't seen any Australian CRTs. That's because Dan's got them all, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do with them all now, right? Since he's probably like, why do I have all these things now? Since he's had to move them all, I'm sure, in the last 2 days.
Yeah,
but yeah, I've been doing some stuff here in the shop. I had some. Spending some time with the family and then working a lot on different monitors. So I'd be glad to let you vicariously live through the monitor experiences.
Where do you want to start? With Franken monitor or where do you want to go?
I don't know. So we could start today. Now this will come out after this, but today I wrote a piece for our blog. And it's about a 1344Q Sony PVM. And
that's all right. It was me. I accidentally, the mouse. I'm sorry, everyone. I had to put a thing in the middle. This stupid mouse, it disconnects. So I was trying to view your article while you were talking about it, but then it didn't. And I clicked it and then click stop. All right, fuck this. So we're recording. Again, I'll stitch them together later.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll splice them together.
All right. Well, all right. And if you have to cut out something, that's fine. Here, again.
So we're talking about your Frankenstein
blog post
monitor.
On the Frankenstein monitor, which is Sony PVM 1344Q. Go check out the blog post because there's a ton of crap in that thing, like tons of information. I also made a capacitor kit for the monitor after piecing it together, and I put it on a Google Doc. It's really good. It's like I even took time to take my daggum calipers and measured the size of the caps I removed and the spacing on the board's holes to help So if you do need it, and then I also, not only did I put the cap list, I even put down an order sheet that tells you like how much of each cap separately, so you don't have to make that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's in there, and that the monitor started as one that I had run through an inspection video for, where I did this inspection format where I was like the CRT inspector, and I just went through my inspection on this thing. I was like, look at this piece of junk. It was the one that had like hairs hanging out of it, like
oh, that one,
freaking hairs just hanging out the side of it, and the whole back of the plastic was smashed in, and I could tell it was like 3 or 4 cracks on the bezel, and I could push the tube and move it into the monitor, and I was like, oh, this is not a good sign.
It's not going well.
So I opened it up. What had happened was somebody had gotten this monitor and like said, I can professionally service this monitor and install a new tube for you in it, right? And so they installed a new tube. That was funny. And they wrote on their new tube, 2001 installed. But they did like such a half-assed job with this thing, Lewis. Like they ruined the monitor. So what they did was they didn't know, they didn't use the right screws. Like this is a funny thing I found more of these service monitors. You could tell they've been serviced because it's like the old school method of taking like a console apart and then you're putting it back together, but you're using the wrong screws in different spots. And then by the time you put it together, you're like using internal screws to screw the shell in. And it's like, wait, these screws are supposed to be on the inside. And then you go on the inside and it's like, those screws are supposed to be, they're decorative, you know, they're chrome and beveled and they're like supposed to be outside. So once you start seeing that, you know, you're in bad shape. But what had happened is this guy, he took the tube out and he puts a new tube in there and he had tries to stick the wrong screws in there. And I could tell because it shredded the posts. 2 of the posts were just disintegrated. And normally I could pull those posts out and epoxy them together and save the bezel sometimes. But this one had been like triple cross threaded. You know what that means? Like you put a screw in something wrong and it starts threading it in reverse. So like it's plastic and if you put the wrong screw in, it starts creating a new thread line and then it never works and then it just ruins it. So that's what this thing had been cross threaded and posts were broken. So there was no going and saving the bezel. So the Frankenstein thing was I went back into parts land that I have back here, this big graveyard of parts, and I found a bezel from a similar model and then the shell from the similar model. And I took the whole darn thing apart and I was like, I'm keeping this. The reason is the 1344Q is a good model, but I was like, I'm keeping this one for myself. So I decided to just strip it clean, like make it as clean as possible internally. So I cleaned it and then I put it together in a new bezel. It worked out pretty good. I had to reseat the yoke thing, you know.
Okay, yeah, you did all that.
Remember this? We talked about those wedges. That was another thing that guy did when he installed this new tube is he just slid the yoke on the back of it without putting any wedges or any convergence strips. So when I turned it on to initially test it, and you could see in the video, it looks terrible. Like there's convergence, like 3 different colors everywhere. And I'm like, he didn't even install the damn yoke. He just let it on there. And it's like, it's done. That's good enough. Because it needs like 2 millimeters to 5 millimeters in there to breathe.
How hard was that for you? Like when you understood, okay, I got to put the wedges in and some strips.
Well, I just knew it was going to be a lot of work. And that's why I quoted the guy. I was like, you're going to put in, you know, if I buy the parts, it was $200 for the used parts if I tried to go buy them from somebody. So I was like $200 for the used parts. And then on top of that, you got to do a cap kit, tube swap, you know, full monitor swap, clean cap kit, and then redo the yoke setup on it. So, I mean, it would have been like $500. So I was like, you know, what do you want to do with this thing? And he's like, well, and so I'll tell people, you know, you could trade it to me because he does so much work. I'm like, you can trade me this and I can use these parts, especially this one, since I had the other parts in my graveyard. I was like, I'll either do it for you, you know, for this price plus the parts, and then, or you can trade it to me and I'll do it myself. And so he said he didn't want it. He had 5 other monitors that I got done for him. So, or 3
So it's a good customer as well. You've already got a good relationship with them, so there's a good trust there going on.
Yeah, so I did a couple other monitors for him. None of them were nearly as eventful as this one. He had another 1344Q that was in nice shape. and I actually did a full video on that one. It's not come out yet, but I've worked on it, and it's like a deep dive into this monitor. So he had that one. He had a little S video. They're all 13 inches this time.
Oh, yeah.
A little S video N series, and then a 1354Q, and then this really bad 1344Q. So yeah, he was like, forget it. You know, it was basically less to get all the other three recapped and serviced than it was to get this one redone, you know? So he's like, I don't need it. So
it's just how it
like, I'll
goes.
take
I mean,
it.
especially,
Right.
I'm very interested in the work that you do in general, that there's so many unknowns that sometimes it's just going to happen. Someone's going to ship you a monitor and you're like, look, I can't, or just like I've tried everything and we still can't do it. So I think for me, it's amazing that you have so few of those instances to begin with. It says something about your handiwork that you're able to have so few of those things.
No, those do happen. Those do happen.
Yeah.
And that's what happened on another one that I was doing this week on this 20L5. But yeah, this one went pretty smooth because sometimes you get into it, but sometimes it's the opposite too. Sometimes you'll look at a monitor and you're like, shit, that thing's going to be a pain in the ass to figure out. And you'll get in there and then like 15 minutes later, you'll have it figured out and fixed. And you're like, oh,
Dang.
Oh, I feel awesome. So yeah, like, but the opposite does happen. And there are a couple, this customer himself, I've told him, and I try to tell people this, as long as Save on Pat is alive and you can access him, if you want your D series or A series board serviced for your BVM, you need to send them to him while he still can. It's like any of the bigger, multi-format thousands and thousands of dollar monitors, I'd rather people send them to him. He did mine, and like he does a better job, a quicker job than I can do on him right now. Now, once he stops taking the work, then I'll be forced to definitely do it. And that's kind of what I've been like laughing is some of these monitors, I'm getting my like skill levels up more and more because I'm using like the L5. I've probably repaired 10 of them in the last year, and so I know a lot more about them than I did last year. Tons more.
So that's that. Okay, so to recap for people, sort of a lot of the time now, it's so hard to ship monitors that if people know a little bit or they're able to dismantle, it's often easier just to send the individual boards away for service. And when you're saying, the second question is, when you're saying what Pat is an expert at, is it a recapping that he's doing to those boards, or is there something else that he's doing with them?
Pat, Pat's, he's really just going to run through like all his book of tests, and then he's going to use his tools, which again, he's been doing this for 60 years. He's got way better tools, more tools than I do. And he built, he literally wrote the manual on some of these monitors for Sony. So, it's just like, he would know, he'll be like to look at something like, oh, I think that's the problem, and be able to go right there and pinpoint it. But there's also, there's also a comfort factor where I'm sure that if he messes up like somebody's D series board, and like it has an error on it, he's got another one he can offer them pretty easily, like a replacement. But again, to me, it's like when you still have the opportunity to get the best. He's in his 90s. He's not going to be around doing this forever. So if you really want it, you'll be able to get it serviced by him. And then a couple of years down the road, you'll be able to come back to me too anyway, because like, those things, if you just keep using them, you'll have to get them serviced more than likely a couple times, not always, but some of them.
Do you think ever? Look, I understand Pat is a pretty private guy, but maybe if I came to America, do you think he'd ever want to do one in person with us?
No, I don't think he'd ever do anything, because Bob tried to go talk to him twice, and he wouldn't go on camera, from what I could tell. And I don't. And this was years. Like this is almost 4 years ago. I think was the last time. Maybe 3. So I don't know.
I'd love to hear those stories.
I know, right?
People just love just what it was like back in the day. Not like technical, just
sure.
Hear a few yarns from the old bloke. Would be,
I know. No, because he's a
great.
funny guy.
Yeah.
And he talks, and because he's like, yeah, because I'll tell him, I'll be like, oh, well, I did this. And he'd be like, oh, you didn't? Oh, my God, what the hell were you doing? Like one time I was working on a power supply for an M series, like a 20-inch M series, M2, MDU. And it was throwing me all kinds of weird waves in the picture. And I was calling him, and I was like, what the heck's going on with this thing, Pat? And he's like, oh, you have a short to ground somewhere in your main board. And I was like, really? And then he's like, yeah, and this is how, and then I started talking to him, and he told me how to test the power supply. This was way early on. And just remove the plug where it goes into the monitor, and you can use your probe with your multimeter and check and see what kind of energy you're getting out of it. Well, he's like, you can do that, safely do it, but don't plug it back into the A board and turn it on. And I was like, man, I don't know. I like tested, and it was coming out right on the readings. I plugged it back into the A board, and I turned it on, and it just went and made all these pops. And I called him back, and this damn power supply has like 7 transistors, ICs on heat sinks in there. And he's like, pull that connector off and start probing those lines again. And I did, and I was getting like 0 on every line. And he's like, shit, Steve, you just popped every single one of those transistors on that power supply.
So why shouldn't you? What was that? If you tested the out and it was around, why shouldn't you? He said, don't put it. Why?
Because the short to ground it was going in there. It was throwing a current on something, and it was throwing this current improperly spotted, and then the monitor kicks into a fail-safe mode, and it's like fuses, man. The stuff, if it turns on and stays going long enough, instead it just like other things start to fail. And so strangely enough, that was one of the worst ones. I mean, I've still got that power supply here because it's a joke. It was
done, so you completely
it's
fried
fried.
that thing.
I mean, because he'll sell me another one for $150 or $200, so it's like it's not even worth fixing at that price, at least not yet. So, yeah, that was. But that I've had a lot of learning experiences where I'll call Pat about something, and it's just like, oh man. But then sometimes he'll throw me like down the wrong route. He'll be like, check this out, and I'll spend 20 hours looking at it, and it's totally wrong. But it's just him trying to help you from. 1,000 miles away.
Oh, too bad he
over the phone.
He doesn't want to talk. Even on audio, I'll be like, I just want to capture some of those stories.
We'll see. But
Let's see.
I'll ask him. I email him a lot asking about parts to buy from him and things like that. So I do talk to him, but yeah, he's a guy that's forgotten more about CRTs than I'll ever have the chance to probably learn, he's been in it, and he's just been in the thick of it. We're actually lucky to be able to have even somebody like him still around, really. But yeah, he's a good dude.
He is. How to get that knowledge out of him, and
if he'd write a book.
I mean, knowledge and stories. Yeah,
I wish
just to hear about how things were back in the day would be fascinating.
My thing was, and I wanted to do this so bad, and then of course COVID hit, and I was like, this will never happen now, especially considering he's older. But I was like, I wish I could like convince him to like let me pay him to go out there and like work in his shop with him for a week, like as a class or something, as an apprenticeship.
Sure, apprentice, yeah.
Right. So, but then I was like, gosh, that's never gonna happen now after all that happened. But
yeah, I'm the same. I would be even like, well, can we talk to Pat even if we don't record it? Like, maybe I'm being a bit selfish there.
Sure,
I'm like, I just want to.
Because a lot of times that's what I do, and then he's like, Steve, I got to get off the phone, because I'm like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then 45 minutes later, he's like, I got to go, man. I can't talk to you forever. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Even though I want to talk to him forever. Yeah. But that was so, but anyway, I had to get Pat involved on this other one that was the Nightmare, the 20L5 I worked on. This is the monitor. Did you see any of my posts or anything where I put out about that shipping container? It's a crate. Okay, it was a crate from Uline. That's a professional box that's on a pallet in wood.
Yeah. That was nice. Yeah.
Well, this was the L5 that was shipped to me in that pallet, right? So I get it out, and I will have more content coming on. It's just a mess because the darn repair took so long. But so I get it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing, if it was packed in a box, I'd have been like, this thing got freaking screwed, at shipping. It was crazy. So it had no power button on it, right? Nothing there. It had a huge like dent in the side right beside the power button where that is, like where it had either fallen off a table like onto a rock and made a huge dent in it and dented the frame and everything, or somebody had just ran into it with like something super hard accidentally. And I mean, pushed in, bent the frame right there. I'm sure it broke the arm off on the button. And so thankfully this guy was lucky enough where you just plug it in and the button was fixed on the on position. So it would just turn on. You just have to kill the power to turn it off. And I turned the damn thing on, and I mean, it's the loudest PVM I've ever heard. It was like...
It's the fan, or what's making the noise?
No. Every transformer inside of it, including the flyback, is vibrating off its gourd, going... and making the most hideous squeals. Like, my kids are always laughing, running in. What are you working on? There's another monitor. And they're like, Dad, what the heck is that sound? My ears are like bleeding.
Because kids can hear it more than adults. Yeah.
Well, I could hear it, but yeah, it was hideous, like awful. And so I, usually I'll let it run for like 30 minutes just in the garage the shop. And it's not going away. So I'm like, oh, it's a major problem. So I was like, yeah, isn't that funny? And so I was just like, damn it. So, but then I said...
So the customer knew this was bad. Like, the customer shipped it to you knowing it was a bad shape.
Like, so yeah, I got this, but it's pretty much a dog turd, right? And it's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay.
You understand that's, you've understood you've shipped me a dog turd.
And I was like, yeah, so to start off, I was like, so it does make this noise, and it also does like this streaky thing on the screen. You see all kinds of crazy ass interference. Yeah. You could still see the picture. Sometimes it would calm down, but it was always making the noise, and it was like jittering and had wavy stuff in the white lines, like jitters and stuff. And so I'm like, this thing is a dog turd. And so I'm like, first off, I didn't even open it yet, right? I did all this test. I'm like, I haven't even opened it. I'm looking at the back of the monitor. You could see this in that unboxing video if anybody cares on my channel. But they're the back of the PVM where the plastic is, on the, again, same kind of thing as the 1344Q. Something had hit it and shattered the plastic, like where the emblem is and the input board is. And I was like, oof, okay. And they also, again, didn't have the power button. So I emailed Pat, and I was like, Pat, I need a 20L5 cap kit, repair kit, and I need a back plate for one if you have one, and I need the button. And he's like, wow, you're a lucky man. I've got all that stuff. And I was like, great, just send it to me. And it was like $300, $400 for those things. And this buyer didn't care. He's like, yes, I'll buy them. I want it back. So I buy the parts, and they get here, and it took like 2 weeks for him to get here because it's a huge box. It's coming from California, and he shipped it on like this snail mail, like the cheapest, slowest. I couldn't believe it. I was like, he really didn't ship it because he's an old man. I was like, he freaking forgot to ship my parts. And no, it took forever. So they got here, and I'm like, okay, now I finally got to start working on this monitor. So I take the shell off, and I am just blown away by how much worse the situation is. This monitor had been covered, like the entire B board, which is the video board on the side, and then there's the base main board with like the flyback and all the power stuff, and the input board where you plug in your video sources. All of those three major boards were covered in rust. I mean, awful. And I'm like, oh no, dear God, this is terrible. And like the B board, I tried to find replacements for them, and I couldn't get them. I couldn't get the replacements for the B board and the input board. So I knew we were screwed on the main board. I was like, I have to make that work somehow. So I did it one at a time. This is normally how I do these repairs with this thing. I serviced the deflection board, which was in actually miraculous shape, like perfect, no rust, nothing. It was clean as a whistle. And so I recapped it. And then I always, put the board back and test the monitor, make sure I didn't do something wrong there, and before I move on to something else. But this time I recapped it, and I put it in there, and it started squealing 10 times louder. And the screen's going absolutely ape shit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I do not know what I did. But there's no, I was looking at my work. I was like, I did this freaking cap kit perfectly. Like it's clean, like nothing, not a single burn on the board. I'm like, I went through and checked continuity. Everything's perfect. So I'm like, it's not that. So finally I took the rest of the monitor apart and I get the main board out. And first off, there's a chunk of the board about an inch cube on the back of the board that had just been ripped out of the board. And it was where a screw was tied between the board holding it to the base of the monitor. And somebody's like, I don't see a screw there. Why isn't this coming out? And ripped the board out and ripped the screw hole straight out of it. And so then there's all this jagged repair work on it where it's like
Are there
fixing
actual traces in there or something? Are there
yes. And when I'm looking at it, I'm like, shit, this guy, whoever messed with this monitor before did what I was telling you about, where they fried every IC in it, because I could tell that they had replaced them. Like every one of these ICs in here. And so I'm like, oh, damn it. I'm like, I'm getting ready to tell this guy in an email, hey, I'm sorry you spent all this money. This monitor is garbage. You know, like it's trash. It needs to go in the dumpster. I don't need to spend any more time on it. And I was like, I'm going to have to eat my costs to this point because I feel bad that you've spent this much getting it to me.
Oh, because you've ordered all this stuff from Pat, the 300
right.
or whatever
And
it was.
he shipped the monitor to me, you know. So that was I know that was expensive. So I'm like, I'm just ripping this board out and like I'm going to sit there. And what I did was I found all these rust spots on the board, all right? And it had gone over and the rust had gotten on like the contacts that were holding the flyback to the board and transformers. So you could see all this awful corrosion. So I had to sit there and clean all that off and then reflow all the solder on this stuff, like reflowed it all. And
like every point that you could find.
Yeah, every point. So it was probably like 80 points on it that were total. And I mean, everything. I was like, if it's a transformer, it's making noise, I'm reflowing the solder on it. And I was like, this is the last thing I can do to give this guy the best shot. This damn thing will work again. And I shit you not, I turned it in, plugged it in. It worked perfectly after I did that and put it back together. And I was
so how's
just
the
like,
noise situation now?
No, it's not. I mean, it does have like some screens you can hear it.
Yeah,
but it's nowhere near where it was. It's like if you get a bright white screen, you can hear a little bit. But it sucks because like I got it, of course, all put together and fixed and adjusted, and I find out that the tube is basically like half or by like 60% of its life is still around in this CRT tube. So it's not the brightest. The color white balance is not basically capable on this tube unless we tried to rejuvenate it, and that's not something I'm going to do on this one because that could fry the tube, and then it would be another. You'd do all this work to get it.
Then all that work is for nothing.
So yeah, I ended up getting that board repaired, and I ended up getting the arm installed, the button that worked fine. Everything's working on it, and I had to sit there with my hammer and bang the shell and like the frame like a metal worker, but it's
like
terrible.
You're a mechanic.
Yeah, but
like
it's just like, and I don't even have any like good chop shop or like, you know, beating mallets or anything. I'm using like wood hammers to try to straighten out this stuff. So it's just making more bangs. So it just looks like somebody took a lot of little dings and hit it a bunch. So that guy's supposed to, the delivery guy or the pickup guy who brought it here from a special contracted shipper. He does like antiques and moves stuff all over the country. And he's coming back this week to pick it up. I have to go put it out in that box. But
so this shipper, the shipper who does it. So this is not the end client, but there's this expert transport guy who's used to
this
antiques
guy found this guy through the company U-Ship, which is it's just a company that you go online and they're like, we'll find you somebody goes and basically says, these are the shippers in your area that are with us that will take your job, that are smaller. And that's so they go on there and find work, the shippers do. And then vice versa. So you find people that will ship your stuff, and it's usually weird stuff, odd shaped stuff, valuable, fragile, things that need special loads. I know it's expensive because I asked, the guy came here and offloaded it, you know, and did a good job. And I talked to him and I was like, so what if I had, you know, he's like, so you do this a lot? And I was like, you do this all over the country? He's based in Atlanta, Georgia, but he was going from here all up the eastern seaboard.
And so as I was about to ask, how are they actually getting them around the country on their truck?
So he's got three or four trucks with different people that work for him, and they're small. It's like, I mean, it's not small. It's literally a truck with like a nice long covered pull behind trailer that he says is stuff in.
Makes.
But it's not. It's like a 4-wheel trailer. It's got like 4 wheels on it. It doesn't have a bunch, and then it'd be pulled around with like a half-ton truck. Well, that's what they call half-ton engine, like a bigger than just your standard truck. That just a little bit more powerful. So he drives that around, and I was like, so how much? I said, I got a load here that needs to go to New York City. And he's like, oh, New York City, oh, that's expensive. And I was like, yeah, no shit. Tell me how much. Oh, I'll go there and back for you for $1,500. I was like, I'm sure you would.
But could you, for that $1,500, is that for the whole load? So in theory, if you had a whole trailer.
No, it wouldn't be. It was like one trip. It's like one thing. So, yeah, I was like, that's not really going to be feasible. And so anyway,
so we might expect that your client who engaged this transport, he may have paid, well, not $1,500, but at least a pretty penny.
I'm thinking he paid this guy at least $500 each way to take this here and bring it back, you know. So, and he paid $100 for the crate because that's how much those cost, and packed it and then sent it here, and then had all the charges I had on it, but it is saved. Doesn't. Somehow, I literally thought this thing was not going to make it. I mean, I do have a lot of footage on it, but it was such a like bang to my head. Like my footage is, it's on like 2 cameras. I put them all on the computer and I'm just looking at it, and then the audio files, and I'm like, what the hell am I even going to do with all this? You know, it's like 25 video files and 25 audio files, and you just like, it's like bang this part, bang that part, bang. It's like different things, each one that are in no kind of order. So that one's, I think that's kind of, I
mean, hopefully you can make, have you made that video?
No, that's what I'm saying. That'll be,
you still got to put it together because that's, I mean, it is the friction, it is the journey, it is the hard thing that we all want to hear about.
Right.
Because when it's just like Steve's like, oh, I put in some caps and I did that, bada boom, bada bing, it's done. You know, that's cool.
It's too easy. It's
nice
cool
to know
like
at least there's a happy end to the story, but it is the struggle. Your struggle is not for nothing, Steve.
I mean, it's frustrating.
We're happy about it.
I know it's frustrating, like when you're trying to go learn about a topic, and then it's like, oh, I got to watch a damn 20-minute video on this topic to try to figure out what's going on. But at the same time, nothing upsets me more than when I see this ridiculous video that's like 5 minutes. It goes through something, and then it's like, this is so easy. And then you try it, and you're like, this is the freaking hardest thing I've ever tried in my life, and it's not easy. It's not working the way this is saying. And so, yeah, it's definitely a little bit of both of that.
Oh, it's good. And I'm happy as well that it's a good customer for you, so they understood that process. They know how it's going to take. And it sounds like, well, they weren't super worried. We're all worried about money, but they weren't, you know, they were the whole thing.
Yeah, some people,
okay with that.
I know this is hard for some people to probably believe, because, I mean, I'm not that way. I'm not like loaded or anything, of course. And as far as monetarily, like riches, but there are people that are going to fall into this category that are going to have a lot of money and a lot of expendable income. And then, so I've had quite a few people that are like, you know, it's not the best thing you should say, probably, if you're trying to get work done, is that price is no object, right? That's not really a good thing to say. Yeah, sure. Unless you really trust the person working for you, because then, you know, you're going to get in trouble a lot of times. But there are quite a few people that are in that situation, and I've had to come to the realization that if I'm going to do what I'm doing, like professionally as for a business, that means I have to charge a certain amount of money for projects, you know, and I have to value my time at a certain level And if I can't, then it doesn't work, you know? Like,
it's hard often as well, I think, particularly in a business like your own, Steve. You're a one-man band. You're trying to do things yourself and pull it together. And it can be hard to ask more for your own services, even when you know and logically. And we have that with our group of Comedy Estonia, our group of comedians. We do events, hosting events or perform some comedy at a party or write some sketches, whatever that creative job might be. And I can definitely say that we have a sales manager. We have a dedicated sales manager, and she handles inquiries. And so someone writes to me. It's Estonia. It's a small country. People know everyone. So they write to me and they say, "Oh, Lewis, we want you to come and do a thing." And I'll say, "Hey, look, that's great. These days I have a sales manager. Go talk to Christina. She'll handle the deal. And once the deal's done, I'll hit you up on the creative, and then I'll be working with you every day." Because even for myself as the company founder, it's easier to say my client or my colleague is worth this money, not, "Oh, I'm worth this money." It's much, even for me, everyone knows it's so much easier to say, "Oh, well, our company deserves this money." But when it's like, I'm Steve and I'm saying I want this, it's so much harder to do that, and you've sort of got to know yourself a lot more. So it's not easy.
It's not, and there's and I think that like there's been maybe the past ideas, but on things, and I'm never gonna like say that this, but the especially this year, we've in our country we've had tax law changes where they're like tracking every transaction pretty much into your in and out accounts, no matter what. So I do business a lot of times in person and with people I trust somewhat. You know, we've had a few conversations usually. So, you know, a lot of my business was either dealt with through PayPal, but through like if you came to me, I wouldn't say, "Hey, Lewis, you know, pay me goods and services because we're right here and I want you to pay 3% or
the tax,
give 3,
yeah,
right?
The tax is on top.
It's not tax. It's a 3% fee to, you know, PayPal or something, whatever it is, or one. I can't remember how much it is, but
right.
But people would always be like, "Well, what are you doing trying to get out of paying taxes?" No, they still know you made the money. All you're doing is paying for like a PayPal transaction that PayPal will protect you as it being a goods and services. It doesn't matter how you receive the money. You know, it's like if your job pays you in Bitcoins, bananas, or whatever, rubles or whatever crap money that they're going to pay you in, they're going to, you know, they're still going to know that was money, and they're still going to expect you to record that as your business income. But anyway, I don't think that
it's also a sign of the times as well.
That I've got to report everything that I'm making to the government, and they're going to tax that. So, you know, that in itself is a step towards, you have to price yourself at a certain point, or you just can't make the money. And
I think as you go on, like you have to be a legitimate business, to grow, to be anyone beyond, I'm just doing a few things as a hobby. Well, you got to pay tax. You know, I got to do it legit. I got to do all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, you can't, before you could get away with doing things because there were these ridiculous thresholds, right? So if you were in a certain state, like when I lived in Tennessee, this is a good example because this is all in the past anymore, and it doesn't matter because these laws have changed and now taxes are different.
Has passed.
Well, I don't mean like that, but yeah, like so in Tennessee, if you live in Tennessee, you don't have to report till you get over like $10,000 in eBay sales. Okay. So you have to sell $10,000 worth of items to get a form that says you made 10 grand to report to your taxes. Anything less than that, if you're just doing it as like selling your stuff, then that's not taxable. Well, now they changed it. Anything over $600, any transaction is recorded, and then I don't know how to get away from it saying it's not taxable if you could prove that it was a gift or something. I don't even know if they'll let you do that anymore. I'm not really sure.
It's tough to get around. We have, in a similar way, we might have that in the European Union. We've got European Union-wide value-added tax, VAT.
Oh,
as
yes,
it's called.
yes.
And
I've been
bringing
getting charged that
anything
more,
in.
and I didn't even know what that is. I'm like, what is this VAT?
VAT is so it's a 20% tax on anything basically in the European Union. So if you import something, how to say, everything I buy retail or whatever in the European Union's basically got this 20% added in. As a business, I can I have to charge that, and that kind of gets evened out in the end. There's a monthly statement that, well, I paid out this much VAT, but I also took in this much VAT, and it gets balanced out. The VAT is always considered the government's money. Some people like trying to do a little scam. Anyone who tries to scam VAT, like when I deal with someone, they're like, well, I've registered a micro business, which means I don't have to pay the VAT. I'm like, amateur hour, fucking amateur hour.
You think you're the first to think of that?
It's now, yeah, exactly. You think that you've scammed the government by doing this? No, you've just made, because I
just made yourself a little bit more paperwork.
Is because I tried it in the beginning as well. Good old Australian brain thought I could make multiple companies and get around it somehow, and it turns out not. Turns out you can't. But even if you just send me, like, for example, Steve, you're going to send me some stuff.
Oh, we were talking about this. Did you say they were going to like value it and
they're
charge
still going to
tax,
value
right?
it. They're still going to value it, and sometimes it's hard to prove how much it is, even if it's a gift. I think when my
if I send you VHS tapes, how much are they going to?
Well, that might be because they're going to be. I'm going to be like, well, it's a VHS tape. It's not worth, it's worth $10, and they're going to be like, what? And they may open it, and then we've got to prove that, that it's it. And or for example, when it was my 40th birthday, and my parents sent me a nice gold chain, and a lovely thing for the birthday. There's really no getting around that. I had to pay. Because, well, it's gonna come down to the line, and we're gonna open it up, and they're gonna show, well, this is a gold chain. What have you done? So even on that gift, a gift from my parents to me as a lovely gift for my 40th birthday, had to pay the VAT on it, and it's kind of unavoidable. Yeah. So I get where you're coming from. That sometimes now you just
there's stuff and that's been. This is like really rich people problems here in the U.S., but there's stuff like that if you get certain gifts, and it would be funny. You'd read the stories about it, and it would be like Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl and is named Super Bowl MVP, and he wins a $50,000 truck because he's the Super Bowl MVP. It's some contest they do. And since he won that puts him in a new tax bracket, and he ends up paying $40,000 in taxes on the $50,000 gift. So it's like he doesn't even want it. Why would you even want it if you have to pay $40,000 to the government to get it? So it's that's like the funny stories where you see that where there's like luxury taxes and gift taxes and bonus taxes to prevent money laundering, they say, but it's really just to get government funding. Because
that used to be, there used to be a limit. They recently changed. The limit used to be, again, like a couple of hundred, maybe $100 or something. And now the limit's like $10. Like, it was a real problem for a while because we're getting sending some small shit from AliExpress, and they're like, pay the VAT. And then I paid like 40 cents or something online. I'm like, oh, okay, you glad you got your 40 cents now? Right,
yeah, of course they are. Nickel and dime, and you got the right amount. That's all they care about. That's, that's. I was wondering about that because I've been getting a lot of packages in. I actually got my Time Sleuth in, and it said VAT on there. And it was like 20% of what I paid.
So unfortunately, I think the unfortunate thing for you is that if you're, I don't know how it goes. Where did it come from? Like, whether they have to charge you because it's going to outside of the European Union.
Yeah, I don't know, because I always thought it was just shipping charges or something, and it was just like, this is like VAT. I never thought about it. There was one.
And then there was what it is. Like
there was a British company I ordered a Raspberry Pi computer from recently.
That would have it on, I guess, they call it VAT. So for me, I'm incentivized as someone who owns a business. So I own a business that is also registered for VAT. So as I said, my business can come and go. If I sell you a ticket to a show, well, I've got 20% VAT. But if I buy, on the other hand, though, as a business owner, let's say I go buy an iPad, I don't know, and the iPad's got 20%, I can claim that in the opposite direction. So at the end of the month, my accountant looks over everything and says, well, you sold this many tickets that have VAT, so there's how much you got to give to the government, but we're offsetting that because you bought an iPad. I don't know. You bought a whole bunch of other stuff that had VAT in it. So we're going to reduce.
So you have to sit there and account for everything so you can deduct your VAT.
Accountants have got to do that every month.
I mean,
That's
you've
what
got
we
to
pay.
have them. Yeah,
You've got
that's
to have
what
a good
so
account.
that's
So
what-
I'm in that way. I'm incentivized actually. If I'm buying electronics, I'm incentivized to buy that through the company because then I can offset the VAT rather than if I buy it with my personal money that I can't claim that back. So there's still, I mean, that's legal. That's absolutely
well, then that's the
normal
same thing we do
do
here too. Is you write off business expenses, you write off the entire cost, but you're getting taxed on the entire. It's like here's how much money it is. How much did you need?
Because you get taxed
to
on your
contribute
whole
to that
income
business?
there.
Yeah, so you get like an entire amount, and then you start chipping away at it.
Deductions,
basically, right?
That's the American system,
deductions.
right?
Yeah, and it's
We've got a
mess.
slightly
Tax
different.
law's crazy
We have a
here,
slightly
and
different
it's
tax
just-
code. Again, Estonia has itself. While the VAT thing is that general idea about VAT is a European-wide idea. Estonia itself has unique tax structure that we only pay extra tax if the money leaves the company. It's called You, for example, as I understand, you turn over, whatever you turn you're taxed at a certain amount of your whole turnover, and maybe you can reduce that whole turnover amount down with a deductible, and that's the bill you've got to pay to the government this year. In Estonia, if I never take money out of the company, I never pay tax off that, and the whole thing is redone in a totally different way, and it's to incentivize you to leave the money in the company and to keep building a company rather than pulling money out. So we have very high social tax. When you do pull money out of the company, then you're taxed up the yin yang. But if I leave the money in the company account, it's not taxed every year. I could have 50 grand in that account, and if I don't do anything with it, I don't get taxed the next year. So anyway, different tax schemes between countries.
Yeah, right. But if you don't do it, but you can still you don't get taxed on it if you're going and using it for business purposes.
I don't know. So if it's a legitimate business expense,
right? If you're growing the business, which it's not too much different here, except for I'm doing everything as like a sole proprietor, like like you said, one person. So it's all basically this is how much I made and this is what I made. Like I'll go through and have to deduct everything I spent on electronics this year, which is fine.
You got to keep track of it.
that's
Okay,
like,
so got receipts and things.
well, no, I mean it's all you just like. It's like eBay transactions. You don't really have receipts. You just have the transaction listed, and then you just add them all up. And then if they're like, well, it tells you kind of what you bought or something. Same thing. You go say, okay, every time I go and use this account, it's only business stuff, right?
Okay.
So then it's
all the
easier.
business stuff.
But I mean, then you get to go. I get to write. Business expenses. There's phones. So my cell phone, my all that stuff, any electronics, telecommunications tied into the business, obviously. But I think that's something that people don't think about because I did a bunch of posts about my Frankenstein monitor online, and one of them I was like, this is put together, it's beautiful, the cap kit's done, it's a great monitor now, it's amazing for what it's been through. But I was like, what price do you put on something like this? And I didn't really get that many answers, but I was laughing because somebody's putting out like $200, $400, and I was like, $400 covers the labor, and then $200, I was like, you freaking nuts! You're not finding any PVM that's even working for $200 anymore in America. But I started to say, if it was me and like I was selling it, I was like, this is not for sale. But if you're talking to me and you're asking me like what my idea of, I put it in as like the retail price. And then I was expecting like if you went into a store environment, and obviously these things aren't new, but it's like this is as close to new as you could get for this thing. And it's like guaranteed to not give you any problems unless you go home and screw it up yourself. I was like, this should easily be a $900 item. And that got some people really feathered up, like, oh, $900. You're as much as you want it to be that expensive, it can't be. And I'm like, as much as you want it to not be that expensive,
Right.
that's not even that far out of the realm of possibilities.
You don't understand the market price.
And it's other people.
Right now.
Well, it's other people that like work on CRTs too. And I don't mind the conversation, but I'm at the same time, I'm like, it disappoints me because we're having this conversation now, but it's like you're devaluing yourself, the services you provide, because again, it's something where I feel like people are doing this as like a side hobby thing. And you don't know, you're not going to be able to wrap your round around everything it takes to make a business of this. Just run it as a side business when you have other things that is paying for your food and lights and bills.
We have something similar with comedy when we're selling our services. We're like, hey, you have the party, and hey, we're going to come along and do 20 minutes of stand-up comedy and make everyone laugh, and you're going to have a great time at your party. And then we tell them how much that will be, and they'll be like, what? So hundreds and hundreds for 20 minutes of work? Fuck you. That's like, what? Why am I paying hundreds and hundreds? And, I don't want to give away all the different prices for 20 minutes of work. And, thankfully, that's usually a sign, as you've seen, of people that don't understand the market, or when the market is growing, that it's not 20 minutes of work. It's the hours and days and years of work that it's taken to become skilled as a comedian, as an entertainer, to be able to deliver you that expert 20 minutes and deliver you that. It's not 20 minutes of work. It's the years of slaving that it's taken to do that. And that's fine, and that just means, look, no problems. If that is not what your budget can afford, no problems, no offense.
Right.
That's just what we think our service is valued at. And there are a bunch of companies that will pay that. And that amount that we are charging, what people don't understand, if they were in events a little bit more, our rate's actually a bit lower than everybody else. Our rate is actually quite decent compared to other services in that market. So it's usually just people have never sort of been into a market before and understand the ins and outs of it.
Well, it's just a simple example. Go, and every town in America has somebody that'll fix your cell phone, right?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Call that business. Say, if I have a job and you quote it for me, how much are you quoting for labor an hour? What do you think they're going to quote you? Do you think they're going to quote you $50? No way. Like nowadays, like you can't get, if you go to like a engine shop or an automobile shop, you're going to be paying over $100 an hour for them to do whatever they're doing. So you're not, hell, even the guys who fix lawnmowers charge more than that. And so that, it's not, and again, I think that's a good comparison. If a guy can go down and fix your cell phone, it's small electronics work. It's electronics work the same. So that's a good example. It's
still skilled work. It's still right. You've done just as much training as maybe any mechanic out there or something. They have years of work of building your skills and at doing it. So it's almost transfer. Yeah. And also for me, I have had in the last week and a half or so of being in Australia, because I've been away for 6 years since I've been here. So we've got inflation thing, and I'm looking at and not only inflation, but I'm used to euro, which is a little bit less in like the value. It's about half again or something. So I'm looking at these prices in Australia, just like $100. Like my taxi from the airport was $100, and I'm like $100, and in the end, I'm like, well, I guess that's just what it costs these days. I had to go through a toll booth, and then I convert it to euros, and I think like, well, okay, it's like 65 euros. Like, well, yeah, all right. So
well, that's another like a crazy monkey wrench that's been thrown into this whole fiasco of trying to price anything. Is you have to now anticipate, because inflation, it's like my costs to heat and run a shop and put power into it are actually more than they were a couple months ago, like substantially. So you can't, you gotta kind of be looking at this stuff. I didn't really think we would get into this kind of a discussion today, but it's fine. I just hope it's not boring people too much about business.
I don't think so. I think it's all right. We've had that. I know in Estonia the prices, we have those variable electricity prices as well.
Oh my gosh, I've got that
this
this year.
Went crazy in winter. So
there's
just an example of a variable cost that all of a
I
sudden
never
can
had
blow
that
out.
This last month. The damn electric. So, I got this old house I was telling you about, half a dozen different ways it has heating devices in it. So back in December, I went and got the fuel tank filled with 250 gallons of fuel, and it was $700. And I just had to pay that. I was like, here's $700, right? It's like, this is so awesome. Paying $700 for a tank of freaking fuel in the basement. And so I was like, okay, now I got this tank full tank of fuel, and then I'm like, God, that shit was expensive. I don't really want to use it. So I just let it sit there, and I'm just using the electricity to heat the house, right? That was until I got my damn last bill. And the shit was $250 for 1 month of heating and electricity. Just the electricity bill. And it was one of these bullcrap things where it was like, your bill is $200, but thanks to this variable surcharge, you have a $48 surcharge this month because it's 25% of your bill is on a fuel surcharge. I was like, oh my good grief. So ever since then, I'm like, turn that damn electric heater off. We are burning that fuel. Turn that heater on in the fuel line. And so now
you become that dad, right? You're that dad going around.
I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to turn it down. I tried to fire up this old wood stove in my basement, and oh my gosh, Louis, the son of the thing. So I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. I got all this wood. I'm like, I'm gonna burn this. And it's gonna be cheap. I went outside and I'm like looking into. I don't see anything in the flue of the chimney. It's got a chimney. And I'm like, all right, I don't see anything in there. I think it's clear. Of course, I light a fire, and I'm like, holy I mean, it just takes off. I'm like, I couldn't get a fire to light this easy ever in my life. And I just put a couple sticks, and it just, and then, I mean, it just started smoking up the house. And I'm calling my dad, and I'm like, well, that shit didn't work. And I was like, so I just had to take a big jug of water and throw it in the furnace. And then the furnace just has this black shit.
More smoke.
Yeah, more smoke. It goes out, and then all this black, nasty, watery ooze comes out the bottom where all the soot washed out from me throwing the water on it. But yeah, he was like, oh, I know what happened. Your granddad, he was so cheap that like 10 years ago, he shoved a pillow inside the hole there, so there's no way the air was getting out of the house. It's like, how do I get this pillow out? And he's like, oh, we got to take the pipe out of the wall and this and that, and we'll get it out. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to smoke myself to death down here doing that. So, but I haven't.
So can you get the pillow? Is the pillow still in the flue?
I haven't messed with it since then. That's fine. And we're going to make it through this winter and just burn the rest of this fuel. I've gone through a quarter of a tank.
Oh, okay. And, some time to go, yeah.
So it's not. It's probably. I'll probably go through another quarter of a tank before the season ends, and but it's really nice. I actually got full heating from it in my basement, in my shop. It works really well. It gives this radiant heat. It makes all kinds of creaky noises. Sounds like your house is haunted by ghosts, but it's effective.
Good, mate. Good. Whew. Now I'm just getting oh yeah. Got to go see my girlfriend soon.
Okay.
She's in town while I'm doing here, yeah. So she's like, "Are you talking about TVs again?"
You were supposed to take a break from that.
Yeah, a little bit. Although it's so weird. I'm here. My friend's like, "What are you doing? What have you been up to?" I'm like, "Well, I have a podcast." And they're like, "Oh, that's great." I'm like, "Yeah, some people are listening. It's going really well." And they're like, "Oh, that's great. What's it about?" And I'm like, "Box TVs."
They just give you a look like
they
don't know what you're doing, or they're like disappointed in you.
What box TVs? They're like, "Well, like Square. I've got a box TV." I'm like, "No, old ones, big ones." They're like, yeah, so anyway, I've had this same conversation over
I understand
and over
it,
again.
man. I've had the same conversation with my dad every time he talks to me. So are you still doing that internet thing? I mean, I know that retro tech is like working for you now, but you got to have like other sources of income, right? And I'm like, Dad, give me a break, But yeah, and then the next day he'll send me a thing where it's like some Tony Robbins style con artist who's like, get to 1 million subscribers following my plan, post this many times and this often, and you're guaranteed, it's one of these things where it's like,
Dad's a social media expert.
Thanks, Dad. Yeah, thanks for the advice. He's like, what'd you think of that email I sent you? And I was like, oh, you mean the internet guru? Thankfully, I've been doing that stuff for years. It really works. That's why I've got 1 million. Nope, never mind. But yeah, it's That's fun.
Yeah, why don't we
Lewis,
wrap
if
it
you
up
need to
here? I
run,
better head off.
it's
So we'll
good.
find.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry this came out a few days late. I probably now that I did that stupid cut in the middle, I probably can't use the Riverside tools to put it together, and I'm gonna have to download it to my computer and export it overnight like a bloody idiot here. So
No,
it might
I
be
was-
another day till I can get this out, but
No, don't
I'll
worry
give it
about
my
it.
best shot, and we're all good. So we'll try and get anyway. I'm still away for this week and then the next week, so we'll try and at least turn out one more sometime next week. We'll try to get together, and we will end back up on our regular schedule again. But we may
Regular schedule, and we will have whenever we get regular time. I know we've got some guests, more exciting
Yes.
guests coming up. That
got some cool people that want to
yeah,
talk.
yeah, especially somebody that does have millions of people watching their stuff.
Let's
So
hope
it's a
Mr.
teaser, teaser for you.
Mr. Shanky, am I giving too
Yeah.
much away? Maybe Shanky wants to come on. Let's see how
Yeah.
he goes. Not promising anything. He's a
Oh,
busy
yeah,
guy
whatever.
these days with millions of views.
Trying to convince me to invest more money in these stupid PVM LCDs. That's what he was trying to do. He's trying to sit there for 2 days scheduling an interview, and he's like, "Oh, you need to do this with these." Basically, wanting me to build a custom 9-inch PVM with like the best LCD display in it possible, like build in a retro tank inside it, and it would be the best. You'll have the best test bench monitor that's $1,000. That's an LCD that's homemade. And I was like,
No
my
problem.
gosh, Shank.
Spend $1,000
yeah.
to make a video. Okay.
Thanks.
Only if we can put it on your channel
Right, that's
and then
what I
get
said,
the ad
right,
revenue off
exactly.
a million.
Yeah.
Then maybe we
if
could talk about
Micro
it.
Center will pay for it.
Keep going, mate. You're much better than me. I saw you right in there trying to get in contact with Micro Center. I saw
I
you
probably
having a
could. I
go.
was like, yeah, hey, do you guys want to connect with somebody who gets like 3,000 views? Here's my numbers. It's like, yes, we'll give you a free thumb drive.
All right, everyone. Thank you
Anyway,
very much for
thanks for
watching
hanging
again
out
for
with us,
another
people.
episode as we bring it through. See you next week.
Adios.
Okay. Hit the
Oh,
stop.